Information comes at us on the internet all the time. But just as we saw in our opening scenario, there is simply too much going on to absorb and deal with every single issue in a thoughtful way. The structure of social media, with its enticing and never-ending scroll, is constantly churning these vital issues, these everythings. And so, to venture out into the digital public square is like getting caught in a storm without an umbrella. I call this the everything storm. I often think about that Desmond Tutu quote, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Now, this is a noble reminder to avoid silence when facing inequality. But in the age of social media, what does avoiding silence even mean? Does it mean posting every passing thought, biting back at every disagreeable opinion we see, devoting ourselves to every single vital cause? Now, I think the misinterpretation of this quote, that we must speak out against every single injustice all the time, is born out of the best intentions. But it's ultimately impractical, because when we try to cover the massive volume of so-called vital issues, we end up not knowing what to focus on and ultimately just exhaust ourselves. The attempt to care about everything all of the time is itself a propellant of the everything storm, and it's a recipe for immediate burnout. The everything storm is particularly bad in digital spaces, but it can totally stalk conversations too. When I find myself speaking to someone, especially someone I disagree with politically, I often become so overwhelmed by all of the issues that we could be talking about and should be talking about that we end up discussing nothing at all. Luckily, there's a solution. By focusing on just one or two topics, by leaning on our own personal experience and not vague references to news stories we only half know, we can escape the storm, or at the very least, grab an umbrella as it wails around us. But the everything storm, this constant barrage of information that demands our attention, is just one of the structural elements of the internet that gets in the way of having meaningful conversations. Luckily, for every challenge that social media provides, there is also a solution, and quite simple ones too. So one structural challenge is character limits, the maximum number of letters, numbers, and symbols that are imposed by many social platforms, and the unofficial maximums imposed by other venues where a post with more words might get less traction. These literally give us less room to express ourselves. Now, on the one hand, this encourages us to be more witty and concise. But unfortunately, not everything can be explained through a funny tweet or a pithy Instagram caption. Some of our thoughts are too messy, too complicated, too unformed to whittle them down into a bite-sized package. Social media may be a lovely place for a mindless scroll and a few good laughs, but it creates a difficult space for nuanced connection when we are restricted in how much we express. The solution? Move to platforms and modes of communication that allow us to fully express ourselves without limitation. Letters, the phone, in-person chats, even emails often counteract this. Another structural challenge is that social media comes with an audience. So that means that when we post a comment, we are doing so with the awareness that that comment will be seen by every other person who has ventured south to the comment section. And we tweet with the knowledge that our passing thought might be seen by anywhere from 0 to millions of social media users. This can be fun. But when we play only to an audience, we're often losing our scene partner, more consumed with the show of our connection than the actual connection itself. And with this built-in audience, we also have a point system, right? The sort of applausometer informed by likes, shares, and comments. Again, this isn't inherently bad, and it's often fun to get heaps of praise for a quick-thinking one-liner, but neither an audience nor a point system create fertile ground for genuine communication. Conversations are best conducted far from the intoxicating glare of the audience, miles from the stage of social media. The solution? Find a place far from the audience, where clapbacks and disses aren't rewarded with instant points, and set up your conversation there. Social media allows us to be less accountable than we would be in physical spaces because we don't have to deal with the immediate consequences of hurting someone. If, for example, I'm talking to someone in person and I say, "You have a punchable face," they are going to feel hurt. I will perceive that hurt and then I will make adjustments accordingly. Even if I'm chatting with someone on the phone and I suddenly call them a piece of shit, I can hear their silence on the other end of the line, and that's going to be the signal for me that I should either apologize or backtrack. The enormous distance through which we communicate online and the armor of anonymity that some platforms provide allow us to just throw little bombs of vitriol as we please without having to duck to avoid the shrapnel. Social media also encourages us to be more hyperbolic in our speech. Because of the amount of noise on the internet, one of the only ways we can break through the cacophony is by employing extreme language, which then creates a battlefield of explosive statements just so we can be heard. Now, this is understandable for tweets, posts, and comments, but this poses a challenge when we're trying to truly connect with each other. And we need to recognize that this hyperbolic language we're accustomed to on the internet can bleed into our offline dialogue. The solution to this problem requires a little bit of introspection. Notice the ways the internet has encouraged you to speak. Is that, in fact, the worst thing ever? Or is it just a temporary inconvenience? Is that person trash? Or did they just make a mistake and could benefit from some pointers? Take stock of how you may be speaking hyperbolically, and then try and readjust your speech. And finally, to the most dystopian obstacle of all, social media is subject to the whims of mysterious algorithms that determine what we are seeing, who we are seeing, and how frequently we see them. These hidden codes are designed to keep users on specific websites for as long as possible, often prioritizing negative posts over positive ones, which means that our understanding of what is being talked about and how it's being talked about is being influenced by an outside force. These structural elements of the internet, the mysterious algorithms that dictate what we see, the hyperbolic ways we're encouraged to cut through the noise, the lack of accountability we're afforded with distance, the audience we play to, the points we play to accrue, the limitations placed on how much we can express, and the constantly looming everything storm that tempts us to speak about everything all the time make it a very tough place to truly connect with someone. These fundamental building blocks of the internet skew us towards spectacle, performance, and dunks, which, in turn, create a space where everyone is dehumanized and seen not as full people, but targets on which we might score points. When I began to get a swarm of hate online, the very swarm of hate that would eventually inspire me to start conversations with people who hate me, I could see that my videos were providing a sort of target practice for people to throw their darts, claim an identity, and gain their own digital capital if they did it humorously. My detractors didn't see me as a full human being with feelings. To cope with the hate, I would often take screenshots of the hate comments, repost them, making fun of their typos and poorly worded sentences. This made me feel as though I was asserting power over the pain these comments and messages caused me, a sort of reclamation through retweet, but this action quickly felt empty. If they had seen me not as a human, but as a target, what did I gain by dehumanizing them and seeing them as targets too? When we think about internet harassment, it's easy to understand that harassers see the people they harass as inhuman entities, but we also have to contend with the fact that our coping mechanism is to regard these harassers as inhuman entities themselves. In fact, we have a word that shows just how non-human we think they are: trolls. Now, I don't use this word, or rather, I used to, and I don't anymore. And this is for a few reasons. For one thing, the word has so many meanings that it ceases to mean anything at all. Sometimes it refers to instigators of targeted harassment campaigns. Other times it refers to people who just disagree with us online. And I've even seen it refer to benign pranksters who are just playing jokes in cyberspace. Secondly, the word troll falsely groups together all the people who write mean comments online. But from my own personal experience of speaking to some of the people who have said mean things to me, there is not one type of person who does this, nor is there a singular motive. We tell ourselves that it's just sad, lonely people who do this. And if we really believe that it is in fact just sad, lonely people who do this, that only makes them more worthy of our sympathy. However, I've found that it's not just sad, lonely people who lash out. Many of the people who have written very mean things to me have robust social lives and simply happen to use the accessibility of the internet to lash out at me. Thirdly, and most importantly, I don't use the word trolls because it evokes an image of a monster living under a bridge, right? One who torments the good and innocent villagers. But this allows us to ignore a much harder truth, that the people who write mean things online are fellow human beings, tempted by the same structures that tempt us. They are not faraway monsters, but fellow villagers, caught in the hall of mirrors that is the internet. Avoiding the word troll is not at all to say that the harm caused by internet harassment isn't real, or that hate messages don't hurt. It is real, and they do hurt, quite a lot. Instead, it's an active refusal to dehumanize even the people who dehumanize others. I'm trying to say that we do ourselves no favors when we convince ourselves that these behaviors are somehow inhuman and far away, because it allows us to ignore the fact that we have all of the potential for this type of behavior inside each of us.